not the appraised value. Not close. The man behind the counter at the pawnshop on Delmar Avenue had turned it over twice under his loupe, set it on the glass without any ceremony, and offered her $11.40 while looking at something behind her shoulder. She had stood there for a moment with her hand flat on the counter. The way you stand when you are waiting for yourself to say something you already know you are going to say. She said yes, that was on a Thursday in March. The rent on the apartment on Dunbar Street in Toledo, Ohio, was $480 a month. She had $312 in her checking account. She needed the remainder before midnight on Friday, or the landlord had made clear that Friday was going to be a different kind of conversation. The three girls sleeping in the back bedroom, ages 9, 7, and 5, did not know any of that. They did not know about the pawnshop on Delmar Avenue. They did not know about the ring. They did not know that their mother had been lying awake since the 1st of January running numbers that refused to resolve, that she had been carrying the weight of 4 people on an income built for 2, that she had tried every other option before this one and had arrived at this one because it was the only one left. Her name was Carmen Reyes. She was 34 years old. She had been a single mother for 2 years and 4 months. From the morning her husband walked out the door for work and did not come back, and the only things he left behind, besides the 3 girls, the stack of bills, and the lease in both their names, was the ring she had been wearing since the week she turned 26. She walked out of the pawn shop with $11.40 in her coat pocket and the empty velvet box in the other pocket, because she could not leave it behind. She could not have told you why. She just couldn't. 6 weeks later, Carmen Reyes walked onto a television stage in Charlotte, North Carolina. And what happened there is still the thing people talk about when they want to say what this show was actually built for. It was a Tuesday morning in early May. The Family Feud studio in Charlotte had the particular energy of the first taping of the day, lights still warming up, crew moving at the pace of people who have done this many times and are comfortable with it. The audience filing in through the west doors with the slightly dazed alertness of people who set alarms earlier than usual. The crowd was good. A church group from Rock Hill had taken the left half of the audience and were already organized in a way that suggested they had done this before. They clapped in rhythm. They responded well, and 3 of them had brought what appeared to be a coordinated banner, which production had politely asked them to wait on. The right side of the room had the usual mix, a retired couple in matching T-shirts that read Feud fans since episode 1. A woman in her 40s who had won her tickets through a radio call-in and kept telling the people around her about it. 2 young men who were clearly there because one of them had a crush on a producer and the other one was being supportive. It looked like a Tuesday morning at a game show. It was not only a Tuesday morning at a game show. Backstage, the Reyes family was in the prep area. Carmen's sister Dolores had driven up from Fayetteville the night before with her husband Hector and their twin boys. Edwin and Leo, 15, identical in every way that mattered and in several ways that didn't, and the family had stayed at a budget hotel near the interstate and eaten breakfast at the complimentary buffet and argued about strategy, which had been Edwin's idea and Leo's idea simultaneously and therefore nobody's idea. Dolores was the kind of person who fills a room when she enters it. Loud in the best way. Warm in the sustained, reliable way, not a burst of warmth but a steady condition. She had been doing for Carmen in the past 2 years what Carmen had done for herself since she was small, which was show up. Every time. Without needing to be asked, Carmen was standing slightly apart from all of it. She had on a red blouse she had borrowed from Dolores, and her good black flats, the ones with the slight wear on the left heel that nobody would see unless they were looking at the floor, which they weren't. Her hair was done the way she did it for things that mattered. Her face was composed. She was doing the thing she had gotten very good at, which was presenting the outer surface of a person who was managing, while the interior did what it did regardless. Her 3 daughters were in school in Toledo. Carmen had told them she was visiting Aunt Dolores, which was true, and she had packed her bag the night before after they were asleep, and she had kissed all 3 of them without waking them, which she did not allow herself to think too hard about. She had not told anyone the whole story. Not Dolores, not the friend from work who had submitted the family's application, not the producers when they called 3 weeks ago asking about the pawnshop. She had answered their questions. She had confirmed the facts. She had not told anyone about the velvet box in her coat pocket, the one she was touching now in the prep area with her left hand. At the podium, Steve Harvey was going through his segment notes when a producer said 4 words that made him set the papers down. He looked at the curtain. He looked at the index card he had been handed. He read it a second time. Then he straightened his jacket and walked out to meet her. Carmen Anita Reyes was born in East Toledo in 1989, the second of 4 children. Her mother worked double shifts at a packaging plant on Stickney Avenue for 22 years and had the hands to show for it. Her father sold auto parts from a shop he co-owned with his brother and coached youth baseball on Saturday mornings. 2 jobs that occupied different parts of him and left a smaller part for his children, but that smaller part was consistent and it was present, and Carmen had grown up understanding that consistent and present is not a small thing. She had been a quiet child. Not shy, quiet. There is a difference. She noticed things. She drew what she noticed. In the margins of her school notebooks, in the backs of church bulletins, on the brown paper bags her mother packed her lunches in, small, careful drawings. Animals mostly. Hands, sometimes. Things in windows. Light on surfaces. She had a gift for catching the specific way light falls on ordinary objects and making you see that it is not ordinary at all. She got through school. She worked at a grocery store through high school and a dental office through community college. She did not set the world on fire. She was the kind of person who keeps her head down and does the work and expects that to be enough, which it usually is and sometimes is not. She met Marcus Reyes when she was 23 at a birthday party for a woman they both knew slightly. In a backyard in Westgate in July. He was funny in the specific way that changes the temperature of a room, not jokes exactly, but a quality of observation that made ordinary things surprising. She liked that. She also liked that he seemed genuinely interested in what she said, which was not her experience with most men she had met, and which she would later understand was a skill rather than a permanent condition, but at 23 it felt like being seen. They were together for 2 years. They married when she was 26, in a small ceremony at the church her grandmother had attended since 1971. He gave her a ring, not expensive, a thin gold band with a small round stone. And she had put it on and looked at her hand for a long time in the dressing room afterward, not because of the ring but because of what it represented, which was the decision she had made to trust this person with the specific weight of her life. That night, she drew the ring in the margin of a grocery list she found in her purse. The band, the stone, the way the overhead light in the dressing room had caught it and made the stone briefly enormous. She folded the grocery list and put it in the top drawer of her dresser. Adriana arrived the following year. Then Lucia. Then Chloe, who came into the world with her eyes wide open and her fists clenched and her jaw set, and who had been that way consistently in the 5 years since. 3 girls in 4 years. The apartment on Dunbar Street got smaller with each arrival, or felt smaller. Marcus got harder to locate, not immediately, not all at once, but in increments. The quality that had made him interesting at 23 was, at 29, the thing that made him hard to hold. He was always somewhere slightly ahead of where he was. He was interested in everything and reliable about nothing, and Carmen had spent a year and a half adjusting to his absence as a condition before it became a fact. He left on a Wednesday in November. He was supposed to be back by dinner. He had said he would pick up Lucia from school. Lucia waited at the pickup line. A teacher called Carmen. Carmen left work early. Marcus's phone went to voicemail. It kept going to voicemail. 3 days later, a text. 2 weeks after that, a lawyer's letter with a return address in Cleveland. The rest of it, the divorce, the lease, the account with $41 in it, the 3 months of utilities unpaid, unfolded over the next 6 months, with the methodical slowness of institutional processes that do not care what they are doing to you. What he left in the apartment, besides the bills and the broken lease and the girls, his toolbox in the hall closet, a box of books he had never read, the receipt from the ring, and in the dish on the dresser in the bedroom, his wedding band. He had put it there on his last night home. She had seen it in the dish the next morning and assumed he had taken it off to do dishes, which was something he did. She had not touched it. When he did not come back, she had moved it to the top dresser drawer. With the ring receipt and the folded grocery list with the drawing in the margin, because she did not know what else to do with it. She wore her own ring through the first winter, through the second winter, through a year and a half of the clinic in the morning and the restaurant at night, and the school pickups and the homework and the bedtimes and the sitting at the kitchen table after everyone was asleep, adding up numbers with a pen and a legal pad because the screen of her phone made it feel more abstract than it was. The numbers, by March of the 3rd year, did not add up. The restaurant had cut her shifts. The clinic had reduced her hours. The landlord was not a cruel man, but he was a man with a mortgage, and she was a tenant who was short, and by the 3rd Thursday of March she understood what she was going to have to do. She got the ring from her finger. She got the velvet box from the drawer. She folded the grocery list with the drawing inside the box, closed the lid, put it in her coat pocket, and walked to the pawnshop on Delmar Avenue. She took the ring out of the box at the counter. She left the drawing inside. She put the empty box back in her pocket, with the folded grocery list still in it. $11.40. Rent paid. She walked home in the dark and made dinner and helped Adriana with a book report and bathed Chloe and answered 45 minutes of questions from Lucia about whether sea turtles dream and put all 3 of them to bed and sat down at the kitchen table. She did not have the legal pad that night. She just sat there. What she kept thinking was, the drawing is still in the box. The ring in the kitchen light, the thin gold band, the small stone. She had not left that part behind. The game was good, better than good. The Reyes family came out focused and warm. Carmen hit the board on the opening question. Dolores delivered a number 1 answer in the second round like she'd been studying the categories since 1997. And Edwin turned out to have a remarkable ability to intuit what the median American household would say about any given subject, which was either a genuine gift or a commentary on something, but either way it was useful. They were ahead. The audience was with them. Steve had already made Dolores laugh twice, which was notable because Dolores did not laugh easily with strangers. She assessed them first, determined whether they had earned it, and then laughed, and Steve had apparently cleared her bar inside of 2 exchanges. Carmen played cleanly. She had the contained competence of someone who has spent 2 years making decisions she could not afford to get wrong, and it translated here, steady at the buzzer, precise with her answers. Not wasting energy on the rounds she lost. She played the way she lived, which was without surplus. Between the second and third rounds, in the brief reset, she touched the coat pocket. Still there. The velvet box. The grocery list inside it. The drawing. After the third round, Steve came around from behind the podium. He moved differently. Not dramatically. Just with a different weight. The way a person moves when they are not performing anymore and have not decided yet what they are instead. He stood on the open stage floor, closer to the families than the game requires, and he looked at Carmen. I want to step outside the game for a second, he said. The audience shifted, not on cue, on instinct. Carmen, Steve said, I need to ask you something directly, and I want you to know that anything you don't want to answer, you don't have to answer. All right, she said. She had the posture of a woman who has been delivering difficult information and receiving it for 2 years and has gotten calibrated to the weight of incoming things. Your application tells us that you have 3 daughters in Toledo, Steve said, that you have been on your own with them for just over 2 years, that you work 2 jobs. He paused. It also mentions that you sold your wedding ring in March at a pawnshop. The room went quiet, not the held pause before a commercial break. The genuine quiet of 200 people understanding at the same time what those sentences contain. Carmen's hand at her side found the coat pocket. She was still looking at Steve. You don't need to, Steve started. No, Carmen said. I don't mind saying it. She took a breath. I sold the ring to make up the difference on rent. I was short. That was the option I had. She said it the way you say something that has been said inside your own head so many times it has become simple. No decoration. No apology. The girls don't know, she said. I want that on the record, if we're putting things on the record. They think I took it off because my hands swell in the cold. I've been doing that since March. She paused. I've gotten used to the lie. Something in the room shifted. You could feel it, the way a temperature changes. Steve Harvey looked at her. His expression was not pity. It was not sympathy in the soft collapsing sense. It was the expression of a man paying close attention to something that requires close attention. How long were you wearing it? He asked. 8 years, she said. Since the week I turned 26. Steve nodded slowly. He stood with that for a long moment. I need you to be patient with me, he said. There is something I want to do, and I need to make sure I do it right. He walked to the edge of the stage. What he said to the producer there, nobody in the audience could hear. But the producer walked away quickly. And that was the moment the game changed into something else. Steve came back across the stage carrying a white business envelope. Standard size. Sealed, the kind of envelope that could hold a single sheet of paper. A folded document, something small and solid. He held it in both hands, face down. Carmen watched him come. She had not been told about any envelope. 3 weeks ago, when the producers had called and asked about the pawnshop, she had answered their questions carefully, when, where, what the ring looked like, what she had received for it. They had been deliberate about being vague about what they were calling for, saying only that the show sometimes did something special for families in particular circumstances. She had not pushed for details. She had a life full of not yet resolved questions, and one more did not seem different from the others. She was looking at the envelope in Steve's hands and understanding that it was different from the others. I'm going to tell you what we did, Steve said. He stopped a few feet in front of her and stood with the envelope held loosely at his side. I want to tell you, not just hand it to you. Because you deserve to know what happened. All right, Carmen said. 3 weeks ago, Steve said, after your application came in and after our producers spoke with you, we made some calls. The audience was completely still. We called the pawnshop on Delmar Avenue. We described the ring, thin gold band, small round stone, and asked what they had in inventory from transactions in the past 90 days. Carmen blinked. Once, we spoke with the clerk who processed the purchase, a man named Gerald. She had not known his name. She had not asked. You do not, when you are standing on the other side of a pawnshop counter in March with rent due the next day, ask the name of the man buying what you are selling. Gerald remembered you, Steve said. Carmen was very still. He said you stood at the counter for about 30 seconds with your hand flat on the glass before you agreed to the price. Steve's voice had gone careful. He said you put the box in your pocket on the way out. In the family section, Dolores had both hands over her mouth. Carmen's hand moved to her coat pocket. She was not looking away from Steve. She was holding very steady, the way she had been holding steady for 2 years, which was by keeping her attention on what was directly in front of her and not on the whole field of what surrounded it. Gerald kept the ring separate, Steve said. Not in the regular inventory. He told our producer he put it in the safe under the counter the same day. He said. Steve paused. He was going carefully, measuring what this required. He said that the woman who brought it in clearly didn't want to leave it, and he thought that maybe, if she could, she would come back for it. So he set it aside. The room made a sound. One long collective breath, inhaled, a pawnshop clerk in Toledo, Ohio, Steve said, looking at Carmen. Kept your wedding ring in his personal safe for 6 weeks, because he decided, on his own, with no instruction from anyone, that you might want it back. Carmen's jaw was tight. Her eyes were bright in a way that was not going to tip over but was close. Dolores, in the family section, had tears running down her face that she was not attempting to stop. Edwin and Leo, the twins, were not performing anything anymore. They were just watching their aunt. The reason I am telling you this before I give you the envelope, Steve said, is because I don't want what's in here to be the thing that matters. The thing that matters is Gerald. The thing that matters is that a stranger paid attention to what you were carrying and held on to it, and waited. He looked at her for a long moment. There are people like that, he said, and I want it said out loud while we're on camera that they exist. The woman in the second row who had been pressing her hand to her mouth finally let the tears through. The retired couple in the matching t-shirts were holding each other's hands so tightly you could see it from a distance. Carmen, Steve said. He held out the envelope. I'd like you to open this. She looked at it. She was still for a moment that felt long enough to matter. Then she reached into her left coat pocket and took out the velvet box. She held it alongside the envelope, her own empty box, the thing she had kept since March, the thing nobody had known about. And something traveled through the room when people saw what was in her hand, not the ring, the empty box. The fact of it. The specific weight of a woman who sold the ring and kept the shape of the ring and carried both, the loss and the refusal to lose everything, in the same coat pocket for 6 weeks. People in the audience were not making any sound. Some of them were not able to. I want to say something first, Carmen said, before I open it. And what she said next was not something Steve Harvey had expected. It was not something anyone in that room had expected. Carmen turned slightly away from the audience. Just a degree. Not to leave. Not to hide. The way a person turns when they need a small private space even inside a very public moment. She held the envelope and the velvet box against her chest. She stood like that for what was probably 20 seconds. Then she turned back. I need to say something, she said, before I open this. And I need to say it without crying, so I'm going to take a minute. She took the minute. Nobody rushed her. My daughters do not know I sold the ring, she said. She spoke the way she had spoken before, plainly, without performance, with the particular clarity of someone who has found that simplicity is the only way to say very difficult things and have them land. They think I took it off because my hands swell in the cold. I told them that in March, and I have been maintaining it since. And I am not proud of that. But I am also not undoing it. Because there are things children do not need to carry, and this is one of them. When they are old enough to understand what I was doing and why, I will tell them. Not today. She looked at the audience. Just briefly. When they are old enough to hear it without it scaring them, they will hear it. And I believe, they will understand. She paused. I want to say one more thing, and this is for anyone watching who has stood in front of their own version of that counter, their own pawn shop, their own version of the decision I made in March. The room was completely quiet, the kind of quiet that happens when every person in it is listening in the same direction. I was ashamed, she said. After I walked out of the pawn shop, I was ashamed. I was ashamed all the way home and at dinner that night when Adriana asked about the ring and I told her the lie about my hands, and I went to bed ashamed. I woke up ashamed for a while. For about 6 weeks. She held the envelope and the box. And then I stopped. Because I understood, and this is the thing I want said out loud, on camera, in a room full of people, I understood that I was not ashamed of my daughters. And if I was not ashamed of them, I could not be ashamed of choosing them. Those two things cannot coexist. You cannot be ashamed of a decision whose only purpose was the people you love most. She looked at Steve. So whether this envelope has something in it or it doesn't, that is the thing I want to be true when I leave here today, that I am not ashamed, that I did what I did, and I know why I did it, and it was the right thing to do. She paused. That's all. The church group from Rock Hill began it. One person clapping, and then the rhythm finding itself, and then the whole room giving her the only thing it had to give, which was sound. Carmen stood with it. She did not smile in the performed way. She stood with it the way you stand with something you did not ask for and are grateful for anyway. Steve Harvey let it go. When it settled, he was quiet for a moment. I want to add to what you said, he said. Not correct it. Add to it. She waited. The box, he said. He looked at it in her hand. You kept the empty box. And you carried it for 6 weeks. And I don't think you fully know why, which is the honest part, the part that tells me everything. She looked at the box. You kept the shape of the thing you gave up, Steve said, the exact shape, in your pocket, so you could feel it when you needed to. That is not shame and it is not grief, though it might feel like both. That is a woman who understands the difference between losing a thing and losing what the thing meant. And that, he paused, is the distinction this whole room is going to remember when they leave here today. He nodded at the envelope. Carmen looked down. She slid her finger under the seal. The envelope opened cleanly. She tilted it. Inside a folded piece of paper, and beneath it something small and hard that slid against the crease. She unfolded the paper first. It was not a certificate. Not a check. It was handwritten on plain notepaper, in the handwriting of a man who does not write much and takes care when he does. She read it. She read it again. Then she read it a third time because the third time is when you believe it. It said, I kept this in the safe under the counter since March. I don't usually do this. But something told me to. If you never come back for it, send it to someone who needs it more than the display case does. Take care of those girls. Gerald. Carmen folded the note. She tilted the envelope. The ring slid into her palm. Thin gold band. Small round stone. 8 years on her finger and then 30 seconds on a pawn shop counter, and then 6 weeks in a safe under the glass, and then here, in her hand, in a television studio on a Tuesday morning in May. The audience made a sound. Not applause. Not yet. The involuntary sound of a room having something happen to it. The collective intake of a group of people who are seeing something land in someone's hand and understanding what it means that it is there. Carmen stood with the ring in one hand and the velvet box in the other. She did not put the ring on. She looked at it. You look at something like that. You need to look at it before you can do anything else. She looked at the thin band. She looked at the small stone. She found the scratch on the underside of the band, the one from the car door she had caught it on 3 Christmases ago, when she was unloading gifts, when all three girls were asleep in the back seat and the world had a different shape than it had now. The scratch was still there. She closed her fingers around it. She opened the velvet box. She placed the ring inside. She closed the lid. The snap of it, small, precise, final, was the sound that broke the room. Not the ring appearing in her hand, not Gerald's note being read. The snap of a velvet box closing around something that had been out of it for 6 weeks, going back to where it came from. 2 women in the third row were openly crying. The church group had gone entirely silent, which for them was the most extreme version of response available. The retired couple in the matching shirts were not looking at anything in particular, just forward, just receiving it. Dolores had both hands over her face. Hector had his arm around her and was looking at his shoes. Edwin and Leo stood side by side in the family section, not touching, not speaking, watching their aunt with identical expressions that contained, between them, the full complexity of 15-year-old boys encountering something they do not have words for yet, but will remember their whole lives. Steve Harvey had taken 1 step back. 1 step. The instinct of a man who knows when to be smaller than the moment. Carmen held the closed box. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at Steve. "There's one more thing," he said. Quietly, she waited. The ring was appraised when our people picked it up from Gerald. The appraisal value in March was considerably higher than $11.40. "I know," Carmen said. "Gerald asked us," Steve said, "to handle the difference on his behalf, and this show agreed." He nodded to the side of the stage. A second envelope. Carmen opened it faster. She had already done the hard part. The hard part was standing in a pawnshop in March and coming here today and saying what she said. Everything after that was just what happened. She unfolded the paper inside. She read the number. Her face did not collapse. It did not perform anything. What it did was go very still, the stillness of a person absorbing something significant while their body decides what to do with it. Her eyes went bright and wet. She pressed her lips together. She breathed through her nose. "This is not charity," Steve said. "I want to be clear about that. This is recognition. There is a difference between those two things." He paused. "The difference is, charity goes to someone who needs it. Recognition goes to someone who earned it." He looked at her. "You earned this." Carmen looked at the check, then at the velvet box in her other hand. "The girls are going to think I won it on the show," she said. "You did win it on the show," Steve said simply. She looked at him. For the first time since walking onto this stage, Carmen Reyes smiled. The real one. Not the outer surface one she had been wearing for 2 years. The one that starts slow and reaches everything, that surprises you when you see it, because you realize how rarely you have seen it. "I did," she said. The studio came apart gently. Not in the dramatic way of a room that has been waiting for something to happen. In the soft way of a room that has been holding something and is now allowed to set it down. Dolores was the first one to move. She came down from the family section without waiting to be invited and put her arms around Carmen the way only a sister can. With complete knowledge of the other person. With no performance in it at all. With the full weight of every conversation and every year behind it. Carmen held on. She had been holding herself together for 2 years by herself, the way you hold things together when there is no one else to help hold them, and now there was someone, and she let herself be held. Edwin and Leo came down too. They stood on either side, slightly uncertain about their exact role, but certain enough that they had one, and that being there was it. Leo put one hand briefly on Carmen's back, and then moved it, concluding that the gesture had done what it needed to. Hector stood a few feet back with his arms crossed and his chin down, managing his own interior state in the private way that is his. He looked at his wife and his sister-in-law, and he looked at his boys, and he looked at the floor. The audience was doing the thing it does when the main event has happened, and what's left is the warmth of aftermath, not hushed, not done, but in the lower register that follows a peak. Steve gave it time. That is the thing he is good at, that is hardest to learn. Giving a moment its full amount of time without filling it. When the room had done most of its settling, Steve pulled a chair to the center of the stage. Not the podium, a chair, and he sat down across from Carmen, the way you sit across from someone when you want to say something that requires proximity to land right. "Can I say something?" he said. Carmen sat down across from him. She had the velvet box in her left hand and the check in her coat pocket where the box used to be. "Say it," she said. Steve looked at her for a moment. Not at the camera, at her. "I want to be careful," he said, "about what I take credit for and what I don't. This show made some calls. Gerald did something remarkable. Our producers cared. Those are real things." He paused. "But they are not the thing." She waited. "The thing," Steve said, "is that on a Thursday in March, a woman walked into a pawn shop with a ring she had been wearing for 8 years and a box she had been carrying in her heart longer than that, and she made a decision. By herself. For 3 little girls who were at school and did not know and would not know until she decided they were ready. She made a decision, quietly, with no audience, in the middle of the kind of difficulty that people on the outside of it cannot fully imagine." He looked at her hands, the box, the check, and then she put the empty box in her pocket. "Which is the part I keep coming back to." He paused, "because the box is the thing that tells you who you are dealing with." He looked at the audience. "She sold the ring," he said. "She kept the shape of it. She kept the size and weight of what she gave up, so she could feel it, so she would not pretend it hadn't happened, so she would carry both things at the same time, the loss and the reason for the loss, and not confuse them." He turned back to Carmen. "Most people," he said quietly, "cannot do that. Most people have to choose between grief and function. They put the grief somewhere they cannot feel it so they can function, or they feel the grief so completely they cannot function. What you did, carrying both at the same time for 6 weeks, in a coat pocket, is not a small thing. It is the thing." He let that land. "And I want to say one more thing. As a man who has daughters," he looked at her directly, "those 3 girls are going to know someday what you did for them in March, and when they know it, they are not going to think, 'My mother lost something.' They are going to think, 'My mother chose us.' And that is going to be the most important fact of their lives." The room was very still. Then Steve said, "Character is the one thing nobody can appraise. Nobody can purchase it. And nobody, not a missing husband, not an overdue bill, not a pawnshop counter, can take it from you without your permission." The church group started the applause. Then it was everything. Carmen opened the velvet box. She took out the ring. She slid it onto her finger. She looked at her hand for a moment, the way she had looked at it in the dressing room when she was 26, when she was putting it on for the first time. Then she looked at Steve. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you," he said back. They stayed in the studio for a while after the taping wrapped. Carmen sat with Dolores on 2 chairs at the edge of the stage while the crew did the work that follows a taping. Dolores was talking, which she did, which Carmen had always been grateful for, the way Dolores could fill a room with sound and make it feel like company rather than noise. Carmen was listening and looking at her right hand. The ring was back on her finger. She turned it once. Then again. The way you turn something when you need to confirm it is there and is real and is staying. It was staying. Her phone had a voicemail from Adriana, 9 years old, eldest daughter, first to call in every situation since she had been old enough to call, wanting to know if Mama had won anything, whether they were having pizza for dinner, and also whether Chloe had been telling the truth about the pencil box incident, because Adriana had specific information that contradicted Chloe's account and felt it was important to get this on record. Carmen listened to the whole thing twice. She saved it. She did not call back right away. She sat with her sister and looked at her hand and watched Edwin and Leo take turns trying to get the perfect selfie in front of the Family Feud logo sign, while Hector told them in a low voice that they were embarrassing him, which was the absolute truth and which they acknowledged entirely and continued doing anyway. She thought about Gerald. She had not known his name until today. She had stood at his counter for 30 seconds with her hand on the glass and said yes to 11.40 and put the box in her pocket and walked out. She had not looked at him for long enough to know his face. She could not have described him. He was the man behind the counter, and then he was behind her, and then he was a transaction she was trying not to think about. He had set the ring aside. He had put it in a safe under the counter and waited for her to come back, without any particular reason to believe she would, without anything to gain from it, without anyone knowing he had done it. This is what Carmen sat with in the studio after the taping, while Dolores talked and Edwin and Leo embarrassed Hector. The fact that a stranger, a person whose name she had not thought to ask, had paid attention to what she was carrying and acted on it. Without being prompted, without knowing what would come of it. Some people do that. She thought it was important to note that some people do that. In the weeks after the episode aired, Carmen received more messages than she could answer. Not all of them. As many as she could. They came from women she didn't know, from men she didn't know, from people in their own territory between getting by and getting ahead. People who had made their own version of the decision she had made in March. Some of them had done it with rings, some with other things, some with years of their lives laid down quietly on counters in front of strangers. They wrote because they wanted to say, "I did that too." And nobody saw it, and today I watched someone say it out loud, and that was something. She answered them all with the same thing: you are not alone, and you are not ashamed. 2 years later, Adriana found the grocery list in the kitchen drawer. The one with the drawing in the margin, the ring in the kitchen light, the thin band, the small stone. She asked her mother what it was. Carmen told her. All of it. March, the counter. Gerald, Charlotte, Adriana was quiet for a long time. "You could have told us," she said. "We wouldn't have been scared." "You would have been a little scared," Carmen said. "Maybe a little," Adriana agreed. She picked up the grocery list and held it toward the kitchen window. "You drew it really well," she said. "The stone looks like it's glowing." Carmen looked at the drawing, then at the ring on her finger, then at the kitchen window and the morning light coming through it. "It does, doesn't it?" she said. "Some things you carry until they can carry you. If someone in your life has ever made a quiet sacrifice for you, one they never announced, one you may not have known about, share this with them today. It is never too late to say, 'I see what you did. And I know what it cost.'"